Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the Thruthears HEXA. This is the second IM from Thruthears, the first one being of course the Thruthears 0, actually the Thruthears X Chronicle 0. That one was a two dynamic driver, let's call it hybrid in the sense that it was two dynamic drivers, but anyway. It used a 10mm PU plus LCP dynamic driver, being tuned in a manner that it emulated more the performance of a subwoofer with a very quick roll off past 100 Hertz. By 200 Hertz it was flat already. So at 100 Hertz it started dropping off. By 200 Hertz it was there. It was dead. So this was kind of the curve that you get on a Moondrop variations. So by doing this, you take away a little of that mid bass slam, but you make up for it by having a very thick sub bass presence, which does obviously also have its benefits. And then the rest of the frequency is being handled by a 7.8mm that did the rest of the spectrum. It was an interesting IEM, especially considering that it had a $50 price bracket. It was very interesting. And and that was the first one. This one, the HEXA, this one is a 1+3 hybrid, and one being a 10mm driver coupled with 3 BAs. There have been some reviewers that have kind of mentioned that this would or could be considered a kind of an RSV, where excuse me guys, where the 2 BAs of the RSV handling the bass frequencies have been substituted by a single DD, and this single DD is actually the same single DD, well, at least to me and to what I've been able to see, it seems to be the same, absolutely the same DD used on the Zero, the X0, so a PU plus LCP driver. And then the BA is one BA for the higher frequency, which is similar to the WBFK series from Knowles, and the other one is a dual BA for the mids. Actually it's a dual full range BA, and what again, they've got a very particular tuning, and this time the way that it's been tuned is very reminiscent of the Moondrop Blessing and 2 and Blessing 2 Dusk. Maybe not as maybe not as bass heavy as the Dusk, but that's the kind of philosophy that was taken. Whether or not it's got Chronicle's hand on it, I really wouldn't know. But that was what was kind of done. Anyway, this is the box, very similar to the Zero as well. The sleeve. Oops, this doesn't open. Just like the Zero. Let's see if I can get this thing to come out eventually, someday. There we go. Okay. Waifu. Not a very big fan of it, but anyway, I can understand the magic. Waifu. It brings this pouch, which is neither here or there. I honestly don't really like it, but it is what it is. The cable it's okay. The cable is not a bad cable. I just don't like the terminations of it. But again, it is what it is. We're talking about $80, so yes, it could be better, but it's also not too bad. And then it's got a nice selection of tips, some narrow bores and some wide bores. I'm actually using the narrow bore, and some foams as well over there. So yeah, I mean, all in all, it's an acceptable package of accessories. And, presentation for the whole IEM in terms of the boxing and so on is fine. And that's it. As for the IEMs, well, I'm obviously not using the stock cable, as you guys have seen. I'm using an XINHS cable. Excuse me, sorry guys, I'm really sorry. I'm using an XINHS cable. And the IEMs have got this, well, not unusual shape. We've seen this shape before. Thruthears got that little screw there holding down the faceplate, and then you inside the semi-transparent shell you can almost see the 10 well, you can see the 10 millimeter and the driver, and you can see the BAs and so on. It's got a nice the left and the right are nicely engraved on the actual shells, and the shells are basically the same quality of construction as you get on the Blessing, the same quality of construction that you get on the Thruthears volume. So this is definitely coming from the same factory. I mean, I'm absolutely sure that this is made in the same factory that makes the volume and the Dusk, the Blessing, probably as well the S8s. These are all being made in the same factory. What is that? Is that bad? Is that good? No, it's good. It's got excellent quality of construction. Very nice. I mean, I like the feel of it. It's got this. It's just got this nice, very kind of industrial feel to it. It's nice. And actually, considering that it's got this kind of weird shape, this weird triangular shape, it actually fits quite nicely. And I'm guessing it's down to the fact that the nozzle has actually got a decent length. So it allows for good insertion into the ear, and that's it. 2-pin connector, installation is fine. Tip rolling wasn't really something I required to do a lot. It was just basically try the wide bores, try the narrow bores, see which one sounded or appealed more to me. It was a narrow bore, just put it in there and that's it. So I left it. I guess that basically covers the IEM in terms of its appearance, ergonomics, fit, quality of construction, so on and so forth. So what we all want to know is sound. Okay, well, excuse me. I could have compared obviously to a number of IEMs, but I thought it makes sense to compare to the IEMs which I thought had the most similar kind of graphical curve. And those ones were what? What were those ones? Well, the first one was the 7Hz 0. It's got very much the same kind of bass curve, bass shelf, the way that it rises the pin again, peaking it around 3K, just like it does over here. So that was very similar. The other one was the Do Not Tighten S. Again, the same thing, same kind of bass curve, perhaps just a little bit more mid-bass, but yes, definitely the same thing as well. Same peak, very similar. When I show you the graphs in a few minutes, you'll see. And then I've got two. Well, these two are both single DDs, which in itself, they shouldn't have maybe been here, but I decided to do that because of the way that they graph and because of the way that they sound, and I'll get to that in a second. And then I've got here two hybrids. There are a few other hybrids which also are quite neutral in their tune, and I listened to them and I thought, okay, do they have enough, or do they tick enough boxes to make sense to compare it with the HEXA, and one of them was the ISM H30. And the other one was an IEM from GS Audio. The GS Audio, although relatively neutral, it does have a very strong emphasis on the bass, and straight away that kind of said to me, no, look, it doesn't really make sense. It's too much bass for this neutral comparison that I'm trying to make here to start with, and also it was significantly more expensive than the HEXA. And I'm talking about the GD5, just in case you guys want to know. So I didn't include it. The GD5 cost around $170. It's a 1+4. So it would have made sense because of this being a 1+3, but the price just pushed it out completely off context. And the ISN, it's a 1+2. And again, the ISN, yes, it does have a more prominent bass. Although overall the whole signature is very, very flat as well, very neutral, not flat, neutral. There's really no areas there which jump out. It's just that it had a particular area there in the graph which just stood out a little bit. And although when you listen to it, you don't really notice it as much as the graph gives you the perception of being. I thought it just, maybe it wasn't the ideal comparison. The price was about it's about $120, so it's kind of more on the ballpark here of the Hexa. But again, I decided to exclude it. So I've got the Blessing here because of the obvious comparison that it's been talked about, that it has a lot of comparisons with the Blessing. And also the reality is this one, I heard it reminded me of the Blessing. All the IMs that I have here, I was, especially the Zero, the Duno, and the Blessing 2 were all IEMs that came to my mind when I heard the Hexa. And then the other IEM which I've got here, which is very neutral and perhaps even more neutral than the Hexa, is the XINHS Acros Erasmus. And the reason why it's here, it's because it is even more neutral than this. And although, yes, it is more expensive, it's around $135, give or take, it made sense because of that neutrality of the sound. It just made sense to include it here, okay? So let's talk a little bit more in detail about the sound. As I said, very, very neutral across the board. Everything sits within a very narrow band. There's a peak at 3K, and then the gradual descent, a dip around the usual area where sibilance can be more prominent, which is about the 5K. There's a dip there, and then there's a couple of related peak or not. I'm going to assume that there's also that peak there around 8 is also there because of the BAs, and then it drops off again. In terms of the bass is super smooth. Everything about this IEM is about smoothness. That's the first thing I think that is important that I establish here. The IEM is extremely smooth, extremely easy to listen to. Nothing is overemphasized, nothing is too much out there or nothing. Obviously there are flaws, which I will mention the flaws now, but everything is about smoothness. So if you're a fan of the Blessing 2, you will definitely be a fan of this. And this obviously is an IEM that is tailored for a person that likes that kind of sound, but cannot reach that far, or is still not able to reach that far to buy the Blessing. And this is the cheapest hybrid basically that you can right now get that will give you that type of sound. Mids, both male and female voices are, in my opinion, and for what I listen to, well executed. I particularly preferred the female voices, especially because the male voices, certain male voices, they require a little bit more fullness in the bass, and the thinness of the bass that exists in the Hexa is the one that straight away detracts a little bit of that ability to, in my opinion, properly convey all the male voices. A little bit more weight would have been, in my opinion, required, or fullness in the bass to give, especially in the mid bass, to give that necessary completion to the harmonics that are required for male voices to come across 100%. So I prefer the female voices because of that. But both male and female voices were well executed. Instruments, again, are for the most part very well portrayed or executed, with, again, some instruments sounding a little bit thin because of the mentioned lack of a little bit more thickness in the bass. And this is just me personally. I mean, I'm sure that the person that will want this kind of tuning and that likes the Blessing will probably not find that as an issue. But me, I like a little bit more guts in my sound, so I found that a little bit lacking in that department. But the timbre and the tonality is, for the most part, correct, even though there's that little thinness. Most percussion, most brass was fine. If there's one thing that this IM simply does not have is any signs or sorts of sibilance or anything. It will only exist if the actual music has it, then it will, yes, portray it, because it's actually quite transparent in that aspect. The other thing that I enjoyed about it was the fact that, and for example, I used my TK2 for the majority of the listening. The TK2 is because of the way that the ESS decks have been implemented, it can be a little bit too clinical in its presentation. It can lack a little bit of warmth. But funny enough, it actually married very well with the HEXA. I liked this combination. Yeah, this combination of TK2 HEXA, in my opinion, worked very nicely. I tried it as well out with the with my usual Frankenstein combo, the NX7 with either the UAE or the iBasso, UAE3 or the iBasso, so AKM and again a ESS. And with the iBasso, it kind of was again a good match, kind of very reminiscent to the TK2. But with the AKM, and I guess it has to do with the way that it's just been implemented, it just made it a little bit darker, that's all. And there's nothing wrong with it, but I don't know, it just seemed to, because of the way the IEM is, it just seems to bring out the best of it if it's married with something which is a little bit more on the brighter side, or on the more clinical side, let's put it that way. Although personally I usually prefer the more organic type of sound, and that takes me into another characteristic of the HEXA. The HEXA is a very clinically correct IEM. Okay, it's a little bit, I would almost say, borderline cold at times. It doesn't have that warmness that, for example, you find in an Oxygen, or that you find in a Tenstorm Oxygen, or that you find in the Sonic Memories SM2, or that you find even in, for example, in the Aur Audio Aur. It doesn't have it. Obviously, I'm talking about IMs, which are significantly more expensive, but it's that kind of warm, organic. Well, let's put it this way: it doesn't have that warmness in the tonality that you, for example, find in a Blano 3, with all the defects that it can possibly have, but it just has this very kind of old school organicness to its mids. And this is very clean. This is very it's super correct, let's put it that way. Okay. High is very well executed, clean, very decent detailed retrieval, really nothing to falter with regards to that. Where then I do find some fault, and again it's a relative fault because we're talking about $80 here, so let's not be too radical, is on the technicalities. I didn't particularly find the soundstage to be as 3D as I would have liked. And I'm gonna say that I'm gonna attribute that to the fact that it doesn't have that much extension, or as much extension as I would have probably liked to have given that kind of 3D-ness that you get, for example, on a Olina, which does it very well. And it's an IM which is also very much around this price, or even for that matter, since I have got these two, I get more 3D out of a Zero and more 3D out of the Duno, but I'll get to those comparisons now in more detail. So the soundstage, okay, imaging is pretty respectable, very quite respectable, and that's basically it. So timbre and tonality are mostly correct for the majority of instruments and voices and so on. Soundstage, imaging, detailed retrieval, it's a 50-50, let's say, in terms of the technicalities. So to kind of resume everything, very nice sounding hybrid IEM, capable of very much the same performance at least perceived performance that you get on a Blessing tube. Obviously a Blessing 2 is better, and you know, when I did the comparisons, excuse me, you can notice that the Blessing 2 is just more polished in every aspect possible. Maybe the only aspect where I would say perhaps the bass was on the Hexa perhaps better, and this is a very perhaps better, okay, because the tuning, and I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that this is an LCP driver, and that maybe I don't know what the driver there is exactly. I don't think it really has necessarily anything to do with the quality of the driver. I think it's more down to the way that it was tuned that gives that perception. So how does it compare to, you know, the other babies? As the Blessing, I've just basically mentioned it, and you know, any perhaps comparisons or thoughts that it would be a Blessing beater, forget that. It's not a Blessing beater, okay? It gives you a lot of what the Blessing can give you, and by a lot I mean it gives you about 75, at most 80% of what a Blessing gives you, which is respectable. And I'm being really very let's say forgiving, okay? You can notice, if you have good ears, you can notice the difference between the two, okay? So what about the Zero, the Erasmus, and the Duno? Well, let's start off here with the Zero. The Zero for me is more capable to keep up with the Hexa than the Hexa is capable to keep up with the Blessing. And I think for those of you which are that know me, you will understand what I'm saying. What I'm basically saying is I prefer the bass here, although it's also a thin bass, and it was was one of the flaws, or one of the minor flaws, let me correct, one of the minor flaws that I pointed on the Zero. I prefer the bass here in every way to the bass on the Hexa. It could be down to the fact that the bass driver used here, well, the DD used here, is of a better quality, and also to the tuning. But I get the feeling that it's not only tuning, the actual driver itself is a better quality driver than they, okay? The fact that then that same driver handles the rest of the frequency range and does it in a way that it does, I think is already a testament to that driver being a better quality driver than the one that was used here. I like the mids on here, on the male vocals, better than I do over here, okay? Technicalities, I'm going to give it to both of them. It's about the same, all right? And then highs, it's again, they trade blows. This is never offensive or aggressive in any way or anything of the sort, but this one has got more detail, but it can at times touch on being on hinting of wanting to be sibilant, okay, of wanting to be a little bit harsh, but again, don't forget, this is one driver, this is 4 drivers over here, okay? So I think that's a testament to the quality of the driver here. Perhaps this driver in a similar configuration to this, that could be a different story. And I got more 3D out of this than what I did out of that. So overall, I'm not going to say that this is a beat, you know, the Zero beats the Hexa or anything. No, I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say rather is that this will be able to give you very much a sound which is very competent against the Hexa, and more competent against the Hexa than the Hexa is against the Blessing, okay? And that's that. On to the Duno. What I said about the Zero, I basically repeat with the Duno, with the difference that I actually think the Duno is a superior IEM to the Hexa. Personally, I do. Again, its biggest flaw is the bass, and that's the only area where I think it just is equal. But in the rest, honestly, in terms of its details, technicalities, mids, I think the Duno just slightly edges out the Hexa. Okay, just slightly edges out the hexa, and it costs basically the same thing. So it's down to what your preference is, a single DD or do you want a hybrid. And by saying that it slightly edges out the hexa, then I'm saying as well that this is something that for somebody that likes the Blessing, this could also be a possible selection or alternative. It is overall just a little bit more energetic in the mids and in the upper mids and presence area than the Hexa, but nothing that is gonna in any way take away from its performance. Finally, with regards to the Acros, to the Erasmus, in terms of the bass, not only in quality but in quantity, there is no comparison. That's it. Be it on the 1-1 setting or be it on the 0-0 setting, the bass is always superior. On the 0-0 setting, it's got a little bit more bass. On the 1-1 setting, the bass drops and it becomes even more neutral. But still, then that 8mm driver there does wonders. That's the truth. It really, really is a very capable dynamic driver. In terms of the highs, in terms of the mids and the highs, I'm going to give the mids to a certain extent. I'm going to give them to the Hexa, okay, only because the Hexa is capable of keeping up better in the mids with the rest of the frequencies than sometimes the Erasmus is able of doing. I personally think the Erasmus is very balanced, but I can understand some of the comments that I got from people that got the Erasmus that they would have liked just a little bit more liveliness in the mids. Okay, they are the way they are because the main idea here was to try and make everything sound as coherent as possible so that you wouldn't notice that there were BA drivers here. So here the BA timbre is almost non-existent, while here you do get hints of it. There, that exemption of BA timbre and that toning down means that it might sound just a little bit too organic, okay, for some, while over here it sounds a little bit more clinical, a bit more clean, a little bit more detailed. Okay, in terms of the highs on both are excellent. I mean, the highs on the Erasmus are never sibilant as well, very well executed. I mean, if anything, I would actually say that the highs here compared to the highs here, and it's just down to the way that again one and the other was tuned, it's the only area where you do get maybe a hint of a little bit, how can I say this, unpolishedness, okay, at times, just a little bit. And while here the highs are really very well executed, I have to say that. All in all, what is my decision on what is my final take on the Hexa? My verdict on the Hexa is a simple one. If what you want is a IM which has a very neutral kind of sound, doesn't jump out on anything, doesn't, and you can deal to a certain extent, which I'm again assuming you can, because if neutrality is your thing, you can deal with the fact that the bass especially is the area where this doesn't shine 100%. It's good, but it doesn't really stand out. And you can also deal with certain technicalities, namely the soundstage not being the best. Then definitely yes, have a listen, and you really can't go wrong. I mean, for the $80 that it costs, you really can't go wrong. Out of all of them, which one would I buy? Well, it's a hard question, because I like them all for different reasons. Let's put it that way. So my heart, and that's just me, tells me to go for the Erasmus. But again, the Erasmus is the most expensive one out of these ones here. I'm not even talking about the Blessing. The Blessing is on a different championship. But that's just me. It's a worthwhile IM. Like I said, definitely if you can listen to it, Not only this, but listen to any IM. Really, honestly, just listen to any IM before buying it if you have the opportunity. That's the best way. Don't just go jump on what myself or other reviewers might just tell you. Don't. It's we have a little bit of a ungrateful job, let's put it that way. And so don't just take my word for what I'm saying about these IMs. Go listen to them if you can. I think the Zero has proven itself really quite well, so we don't really need to perhaps try it out as much as other IEMs. The same thing applies itself to the Titan S. The Blessing, the same thing, but that's, like I said, a different championship. The one here that's the less well known is the Erasmus, and obviously the Hex is the new boy in town. So like I said, just go listen to it and see what you think. All right. Anyway, guys, I'm rambling here already. Show you the graphs now quickly, and that's that. See you. Hi guys, so graph section now, and straight away this is the graph of the Hexa. And as you can see, this is really smooth. There's really nothing that we can kind of falter or talk in a negative way about. Everything stays within a very tight window. So we're talking 84, roughly 7 dBs, give or take. Everything stays within that window. Maybe a little bit more, but that's basically it. Sub bass, mid bass, this is as smooth and this is that's flat, period. There's no bleed, there's no nothing. That's truth. And then the pinna gain is again very smooth, progressive, peaks at around 3K, and then a nice gradual decline. This peak here is coupler related, and also the fact of the VS, and then some extension past that. The first comparison, obviously, is the Blessing, and this is my Blessing. I've not seen this kind of peak here on other graphs of the Blessing, but in essence it's basically it's very similar to the other graphs of the Blessing. Again, that coupler related peak, extension, a little bit more mid bass, which obviously you do notice it, but overall the Blessing just sounds more complete. It is what it is for a reason, and it has the reputation that it has for a reason. It's not in vain, okay? So that's Blessing out of the way. This is the 7 Hertz, the Zero, and as you can see, bass very identical. And although it seems to be as equally thin, and it's thin as well, there is just that little extra hint of more body to it, which makes it a little bit more complete, okay? Again, the pin again is very gradual, peaks at around just over 3K, nice smooth descent again, couple related peak, and then extension past 10K. More 3D definitely because of this little dip here, that's usually an indicator of better 3D capability. And that little extra energy that you see here as well just fills out better in terms of the detailed retrieval. It fills it out. It makes the Zero stand out a little bit more. It can also make it a little bit on the edge with certain songs, and please, when I say on the edge, I'm talking very minor, because it's not like the Zero is aggressive or harsh or sibilant or anything of the sort, okay? So that's the Zero. This next one that I'm going to show you now is the Duno, the Titan S. Again, very similar in terms of the bass, but it just has that little extra body there in the sub bass and in the mid bass, which complements male vocals especially better. Again, smooth transition in terms of smooth gain, pin again, peaking at around 3, and then the dip again, very similar. Once more, the 3D, as you can see by the graph, is definitely more capable. That ability to kind of be of creating a huge soundstage, while the X is more closed in, it's more intimate, and it's not that it's a bad thing. It's just a question of personal preference. And then this little extra bit of energy that you see here is also noticeable in the sense that you get more body to things. Okay, so that's the Duno out of the way, and then finally the Acros Erasmus, and I'm going to show you in the 00 setting, and I'm also going to show you in the 11 setting. I've got it here as well on the 11 setting, where is it, please? 1 second, guys. So my apologies. There we go. Okay, that's in the 1 setting, but I'll take away that one now for a second. Okay, so that's the. Actually, let me just change the color of that so you can see it better. Put that in red. There we go. So, in the 0 setting, which is already neutral, as you can see, I mean this is neutral. We're talking everything sitting again within a window of 7 dBs as well, give or take. Okay, a little bit more body here on the sub bass and on the mid bass, but again, almost, well, it's flat by the time it reaches the lower mids, so no bleed. And that body there is quite noticeable, and it complements then the male and the female voices and instruments in general, in a better way. The pin again is done in a different manner. It peaks at around 2 and then maintains itself more constant. There's that dip as well there at 5 to resolve any issues that can be involved with sibilance or anything of the sort. But this difference in the energy here is what I was mentioning during the review, that for some people it can make things just too organic and lack a little bit that sparkle that sometimes people would like. The extension past 10K is about the same as the HEXA, and again, in terms of the technicalities, the soundstage is fine, but it's again a more intimate soundstage on the Erasmus. So it's got a soundstage that's very similar to the soundstage of the HEXA. Imaging is as good as the HEXA's. The timbre and tonality, I like it more as well. It's more correct. It's not as clinical, not as thin sounding. And detailed retrieval is also very competent. And so that's it, guys. I mean, like I said, have a listen to it. Don't rush into any purchase of any IEM, not only this one, but any IEM, unless everybody is outright saying it's an absolute beast of an IEM. Then fine, okay, go out and buy it blindly. But honestly, you know what? With my experience and having many times done that mistake of just going and rush buying something, have a listen to it. I'm sure that those that like this sort of neutrality will appreciate the HEXA for what it is, and I appreciate it. And like I said, I like every one of those IEMs that I tested in their own particular manner. The one that I overall would take personally, and it's for no other reason, just for the simple fact that I like it the most, is the Erasmus. But the HEXA is very capable, very capable IEM for what it is and for what its intended purpose was. Okay, guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions you might have, please do not hesitate to ask. I apologize if sometimes I take a little bit longer to answer. It's never intentional. And yeah, that's it, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.